You're listening to Kill Cliff's Hazard Ground podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. So excited about this week's guest because, well, he is a friend, a longtime friend, and we actually deployed together. More on him in just a moment. Just a few quick notes. As we continue going forward with all the events after Afghanistan, we are always encouraging veterans, please, if you're struggling, call somebody, talk to somebody, reach out to a vet, reach out to friends, make sure they're okay. We can't continue to echo this message enough to our audience. So please do not let the events of what has happened in Afghanistan get you down and keep you down. You have the tools in your tool bag to get through this. Just remember, there is help available. Please seek it out. With that, reminder to follow us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast, and keep those Apple reviews coming. If you're following us on social media, see we posted a bunch of them this week. We continue to get more reviews, trying to crack the top 100 Apple podcasts, but we need you guys to leave a short review. Give us 5 stars. Doesn't have to be anything lengthy. You can do it right from your smartphone. Super, super easy. And we appreciate all of the support. As well, don't forget about our promotion with Amazon on our website, hazardground.com. You can click on the Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage or under the sponsors tab. You do all of your normal Amazon shopping, and we'll get a percentage of what you guys spend. And then we donate a percentage of that back to some of the charities featured here on the Hazard Ground. Again, works right from your smartphone. So if you go to the website, hazardground.com, click on the Amazon button, it'll redirect you to the app. All your credit card information is saved. Super, super easy. So please continue to support veterans by going to hazardground.com first when you do your Amazon shopping. This week's guest, it's been like forever since we started doing this show that I've wanted to get this individual on. When I tell you he's got a resume that is a mile long, and it is one of the most noteworthy ones I've ever seen. After 11 years in the Army as a Green Beret, multiple deployments overseas, spending time teaching at West Point, downloading all the knowledge that he learned onto other young officers who were going to lead the military. After that, he ran for office for the U.S. House of Representatives in his home state of Missouri. Went on to be a senior advisor at IAVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans for America, a senior advisor there. Went on to work at the VA as the Assistant Secretary of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs at the VA. Went on to be a professor at Duke. Founded his own company, Golden Key, a real estate tech company, and now currently serves as the president of Fly Exclusive, which proudly fulfills the mission of providing high quality, safe, and reliable point-to-point private jet travel industry. Just an amazing, amazing resume. And he is Tommy Sowers joining us on the Hazard Ground. Tommy, it's the first time you and I have actually laid eyes on each other in probably the better part of 15 years, but it is great to see you and talk to you once again.
Yeah, Mark, it is fantastic to be here. Congrats on all the success. The kids look amazing. And, you know, it's a long way from sitting on the back porch of a Iraqi mansion, like, you know, decompressing after a day. So it's great to see you.
Yeah. And full disclosure, you know, so Tommy was one of the Green Berets that I worked alongside during my first deployment. And it was kind of, you know, an instant connection between you and I, just sort of kindred spirits. And we spent a lot of time, you know, after long days and long missions and everything else, just talking to one another. But, you know, we always talk about the bonds between soldiers. And I think you and I display that perfectly because it's been such a long time. And sure, we've communicated back and forth via text here and there and via social media, but, you know, haven't sat down for a long form conversation in many, many years. But it feels like we never stopped sitting on that back porch of Rod Bonilla Palace complex many, many years ago.
Yeah, that's great. No, I mean, it was clear, you know, Green Berets end up working with a lot of different folks, and we just kind of gravitate to the folks that, for lack of a better term, just can get shit done. And you were a great leader back then, and you know, I love that you continue to serve, and it's just great to see you again, Mark.
Absolutely. All right. More about your story, obviously, while you're here. You went to West Point as a young man, right? No, I'm sorry. You went to Duke. That's right. You went to Duke and did ROTC there. See, I had to remember. You taught at West Point, but you went to Duke, and that's where you went through ROTC and got your commission, right?
That's right. So, you know, I was actually medically denied for ROTC because of back acne at the beginning, and that was like my first lesson of having to like the military's just going to say no. So it was an early lesson for me of like, how do you get to yes as quickly as possible? And, their concern was I couldn't carry weight on my back. I ended up, probably carrying some of the heaviest loads that people have to carry in that. But yeah, went to Duke, thought I was just going to do a, 4-year, do my time. It was, the mid 90s, might go to the Balkans. But a couple of formative experiences there really changed my outlook. And one of my one of the NCOs was a Green Beret, and that was my first exposure to that part of the military that I really knew nothing about. And it was a small program at Duke. There were, I think, 7 people in my class, but it was a great program that was really customized for the students at Duke. So I decided I'd try it for a year and ended up trying it for that plus the time in college, like 15 years.
Now, you were commissioned a year before me, but you actually ended up getting to a deployment in Kosovo before anything in the war on terror.
That's right. So I was commissioned in the Corps of Engineers, was combat engineer, and so did the officer basic course, and then Ranger School and Airborne School, and then showed up in Germany right when all the Kosovo stuff was going down. And so it was lucky really to be a platoon leader. And on my first tour, 6 months after getting to a unit, and that was, I don't know if you remember, Mark, but that was at the time where if you wanted to actually join the military and actually deploy, the options were really small, as you needed to go to the 82nd or a couple different places. So being a platoon leader in Kosovo was a great leadership challenge. And also one of my first assignments there was being sent up to the Russian sector to live with the Russians and build fortifications for them because they were getting shot at by the Albanians. And the only other Americans up in that sector was a Green Beret team. And getting to work around those professionals and see, they basically were plunked down and say, kind of do good things for America. Here's a bunch of talented guys to work with, but a lot of autonomy and a lot of kind of entrepreneurial approach to conflict. So that really solidified, hey, I should do that for my next step, put my packet in, and a couple days later, 9/11 happened. So was in kind of that chute of training when all that was going down.
Right. So you go to Special Forces Assessment and Selection, and then on to the Q course. And not to laud your accomplishments, but you graduated first in your class at the Q course. That's one, not surprising, but two, that's best of the best right there stuff.
Well, I would say it was kind of a rough transition, because right before that, I was able to go over to England and do a scholar program. So I literally went from Covent Garden, penthouse apartment, and to getting my master's degree to like smack dab into like phase 2 of the Q course on that. But I made some fantastic friends through that, and friends I still have to this day. So I'm not going to really comment on the distinguished honor grad stuff. They just, they
had to give it to somebody, right? Out. Yeah, they have to hand out those things, and you may as well have accepted it, right? Makes complete sense. We'll allow you to stay humble there. So then in 05 to 06 is when you and I meet in Iraq for your first deployment there and mine. And for those who haven't been paying attention to the finer details, what always struck me about you more than anything, I walk into this Green Beret world and I'm just, one, I'm sort of in awe of it. And two, but I'm, out of my element and trying to find my way. But, you had such a great balance of cerebral nature and the ability to be a warrior at the same time. And it's really hard to strike that balance. And I think that's what made you such an effective leader and somebody that I gravitated towards, because in general, I was made better by you. I was made smarter by you. You helped me understand the environment. You helped me understand sort of, how to operate in an unconventional manner when my entire career had been beaten to me to be very conventional. And so from that standpoint, you helped make my job easier on a day-to-day basis, even though, our jobs are sort of parallel, but never really crossing, if that makes any sense to the audience there. But, that first deployment for you to Baghdad, just kind of explain your guys' mission there and what you were charged with.
Well, there was actually a deployment just prior to that. So my first deployment was in 2004, a couple months after I got to 10th Group. And so that was a very, traditional Green Beret mission. So immediately plunked on a team. I was the youngest guy on the team. And my first deployment was from, I believe, November of 04 through about June of 05. And that was a classic Green Beret mission. I mean, I lived in a house in the middle of a city, a multi-ethnic city, and it was sort of just outside of Salah-ad-Din, right when all the Sunni insurgency was really kicking off on it. And that was an awesome mission because, I saw my boss like once a month and was kind of left to do good things for America. So the challenge of that was much more of a combat mission. But you wake up every day and it's, what should I do? Should I go meet with insurgents and try to flip them and, get intel on the rest of them? Should I go meet with a sheik to create a jobs program? Or should I go train, lead and advise Iraqis so that we can work ourselves out of a job here? And so I had a fantastic team during that deployment. A lot of stress, kind of, again, living not on a big base, but in a house in a city. And then the second deployment where we met was, it was very generous of you to call me a warrior because, I was a PowerPoint warrior for most of that deployment. Started, advising the Iraqi Special Operations Forces that was also based at a different part of the Baghdad airport. And then to my reluctance and chagrin, was pulled up to be the Special Forces advisor to the Baghdad commander. And so that was you saw me when I was getting huge. I was working out and eating like 12 chicken breasts a day and, all that brown and root stuff and living in a kind of a mansion in that compound. But that was what I was asked to do, for it. So I wasn't happy about it initially, but it did have to create a lot of working by, with, and through, in this case, working by, with, and through a 2-star general who had 60,000 folks underneath him, and Special Forces was just a small part of their day. Now, we did everything every night, but I hated it at the beginning. I went from, with my team to at a desk talking with generals. And in general, I tried to not talk to generals as much as possible in my military career. But yeah, that's where we met on that. And I appreciate those comments. I would definitely not call myself a warrior on that deployment.
No, but again, it's the warrior mentality coming from that first deployment. And what I think was so critical, at least, for me, is understanding that ethos and that mentality of Green Berets and why it's so ingrained in what they do on a day-to-day basis. Because again, I had a very similar mission to you in a sense that my main mission was advise and train. It was foreign internal defense. It was build up the Iraqi Special Operations Support Battalion, which, I said it repeatedly on this podcast that if you laid out all the assignments in Iraq and said, here, Mark, as a mid-grade captain, pick one, I could have never picked a better one on my own. Yeah. I had really no idea what I was getting into. I was just very fortunate to be in an environment where I was able to flourish. And like you, I'm a very autonomous individual who doesn't need much instruction. If you sort of give me left and right limits, I can operate within them, and I'll come back for a question here and there. But for the most part, I can figure most of it out on my own. And I was given this sort of, the capacity to do that. I think it made me a better leader. It made me a better officer. But furthermore, it allowed me to operate in an environment in the Green Beret world where, as you said earlier, just get shit done, because there wasn't really much tolerance. I've always said when I talk about my experience that, the Green Berets, they're not going to tell you when you're doing it wrong. They're just going to find somebody else to do it. They're not going to hold your hand through it. They'll just find a different solution. As you said, it's just get things done. And so the only way I knew that I was doing a good job is that they kept giving me more work. Like they kept coming back to me with more and saying, hey, Mark, we need this, we need this, we need this. Okay, well, I'll just keep getting it for you. And as long as I kept producing, I felt like I had some value to the team. But, in a lot of our conversations, and I think one of the things is that I took the most out of that whole deployment was, the value in being a role player. Like it's not always about being the center or, the center of gravity of any given mission. I got a chance to do a lot of things I probably shouldn't have done, probably wasn't necessarily trained to do and be a part of, but whatever small piece of the pie that I had for as long as I had it, I had control over it. And from that standpoint, I was able to have a positive effect on everything that we did. But again, I attribute that understanding of that to a lot of the conversations that you and I spent together.
Yeah, that deployment was interesting because the previous deployment was working by, with, and through Iraqis to kind of, do America's will. And that deployment was a lot more working by, with, and through two-star generals to also, do what we thought was, the best, to give us freedom of action, to give us the opportunity to go after targets. And so it was a different sort of influence operation on that. But I do remember our discussions about it because it was a really challenging time in Baghdad where basically a civil war was happening. And when you saw that at the strategic level of folks, and I'm not trying to, call out names, but, the strategy clearly wasn't working, and the people tasked with creating strategy needed advice and needed counsel on that, because I saw this increasing default back to, well, let's go back to like core metrics of, number of IEDs that we found or number of insurgents that, captured or all that, when really, a different strategy was needed. So that's, I was trying to channel, my boss, the 10th Group, commander, and the 10th Group battalion commander, who had their own vision of how we should be, prosecuting that war. So it gave me a really interesting seat at going from, I would say, the very tactical level on the first deployment to a very strategic level on the second.
To make this conversation take a tangent, just to we talk about the strategic stuff and obviously everything that's gone on, in Afghanistan. And I've said this openly, and I don't think that there's a lot of people who disagree, but to that end, the military itself owes a lot of the blame for failures in Iraq and Afghanistan, because strategically, anybody who's spent, this is what I say, anybody who's graduated basic training, okay, and has a basic semblance of what basic combat skills are, and then spent any amount of time with the Iraqi or Afghan army, knew they could never be us. Right? At the most rudimentary level, they were never going to be as proficient at this as we are. There might be small little factions of it, and the unit that we work with certainly exuded those factions, but it wasn't enough to sustain a country, and it wasn't enough to defend a country. And so to that point, as somebody who has worked at the strategic level, even at higher levels of government that you've been through, is that a fair assessment that the military itself owns a large part of the blame for 20 years of Afghanistan and 8 years of Iraq?
Well, here's how I think about it is people, it's less about assigning blames, but going back to the core decisions that were made on this. So, you start at the beginning of Afghanistan, and it was actually one of the most brilliant military campaigns in modern history. And, there's maybe some hubris here, and it wasn't me, but it was predominantly 5th Group, Green Berets, who, 500 folks, go in and topple the Taliban, oust them from power, do by, with, and through. But then I also remember that time. I mean, everybody wanted to be involved post 9/11. And so you think of all these generals kind of sitting on their hands after sitting broadly on their hands for decades in a peace building operation. And now's our chance to show this. So that decision to say, hey, we should move this from this counterterrorism operation to a nation building operation. It wasn't just generals, but, you had a Bonn agreement where we're going to create somewhat of a Jeffersonian democracy in one of the hardest places in the world to do that. And, I love the military, and military folks are going to come in and do their best. But certainly, if I cataloged all the different statements over the past 20 years of we're close, we're rounding the corner, the Afghan army is ready to go, all these things that, of course, have unraveled, that's our history now. And so for me, what's critical is that we learn from our history on this. One of the things that brought me national attention when I got out and ran for office was calling for the end of the war in Afghanistan. And this was in 09 and 10. We had spent about $600 billion. Now we've spent $2.3 trillion and blood and treasure and sacrifice and divorces and missed second grades and missed third grades and all that burden that has been carried. And our political leaders have to have, before we consider the next one, really think through the nation building aspirations that got us in and kept us in for 20 years.
Yeah. And, there's no simple answer to any of this. And
yeah,
again, we could take the next 2 hours, you and I, to discuss all this, and we don't need to, because that's not the point of this. But just somebody who has strategic level experience, I was just curious on your viewpoint of the whole thing. So,
well, I mean, just one other example I give you is, so Colombia and the FARC. I mean, Colombia and the FARC could have been in Afghanistan, but instead it was a handful of Green Berets rotating down there. It was a heavy burden on one specific group, but it was by, with, and through the Colombian people. And, we don't talk about Colombia very, very much. Its economy is booming. The FARC is really not a political factor. And that's an important lesson, is not just kind of like just look at Afghanistan, but also look at some of the other successes that may be under the radar that we did at a fraction of the human and capital cost of Afghanistan.
Yeah. And ultimately that's something that will be forgotten quickly, which is the sad part about it. Right. I mean, we can turn the page pretty very quickly in politics, especially nowadays in the news cycle that we live in. But ultimately, that is still something that I think as veterans, it's our responsibility to continue to remind people of that. That sacrifice, more than anything, is sort of should be at the forefront of the discussion. But again, alas, it likely won't be. Okay, so that deployment ends, and I can I put you on the spot now, or should I wait till later?
Go ahead, Mark.
If you can't come up with anything, that's fine. Give me one memory from our deployment that you remember, something you and I did, some story. Just the audience always asks about me, and I never tell anything about myself. So
yeah,
we're going to allow you to tell something about me, good, bad, embarrassing, different, or otherwise.
Well, my recollection again was that, whenever you deploy as Green Berets, you usually get some bolted on folks, to you. And usually the folks, are from conventional forces, and they're pretty happy to be with Green Berets. Like, we tend to have sort of access to adult beverages. We tend to be a little bit more casual. We tend to be, and again, the cream really rises, to the top on this. So I just remember sitting on the back porch of the little palace that I was in, and you were incredibly frustrated with the progress of the training for the support battalion on it. And I just remember like working through, because it's a teaching mission. I thought I was a good teacher, and then I had to train 500 Iraqis to move from like bakers and plumbers and electricians into our version of special operations. I just remember you being exceptionally frustrated with like the lessons not getting through. And then we talked a lot about, how do you teach? How do you actually, and one thing I've learned about teaching, which is a tough thing, and it's this odd word when you talk about being deployed, like think of your best teacher ever. They probably gave a shit about you, which means they loved you. And I've forgotten and remembered this lesson too many times. But when I'm a great teacher, I actually love my students, and I care about them. And that's hard to do when you're in combat and you're teaching somebody with an entirely different cultural, language, background and framework. But I saw like that growth happen over that deployment. I think as you found the people that you loved inside of the support battalion, and so moving a tough guy like Mark, all like burly, and he was ripped back then into this like kind, caring, loving person was a wonderful transition to see.
Yeah, I'm a big old teddy bear. Just ask anybody who knows me. To that end, I will share this. Your lessons went well. because it was 8 days before I left the country that the unit I trained saved my actual life. So
Yeah.
It was lessons that were well learned. But again, thank
Yeah.
you for the kind words. Now, speaking of being a teacher, that's where you head next to go download all this wealth of information, this wealth of knowledge to the next generation of leaders at West Point.
Yeah. So this was an awesome assignment, and it was an awesome assignment, especially for my last assignment in the military. The typical way they do it is, after your company command, they send you off to grad school at a great grad school, and then you're rogered up for a 6-year commitment. But because I got my graduate degree in kind of this weird way ahead of time, I was what's known as a direct hire. And so this was December of 2006. And so I showed up there, and, I went from a place where no one gives a shit if you're a Green Beret or, what your badges are, your tabs or any of that stuff, to like walking around campus as probably one of 2 Green Berets, the only one that was like straight from combat. And so my girlfriend at the time, who you met, and future fiance, future ex-fiance, future fiance, future ex-fiance. It's a complicated story. She would always try to like pack my head back into normal size when I'd walk down campus, and all these cadets. So again, this was 06, so they had all decided to join and go to West Point kind of in the height of the war. Very different decision than what I made when I decided to do ROTC in 1993 and 1994. But West Point was just Candyland for me. I mean, you're an hour north of the city. We ended up inviting a ton of people up from the city to come talk. And I know you're in media. I taught a media and politics class, and literally we had everyone from Tucker Carlson to Lorne Michaels to Dan Rather to Brian Williams to Roger Ailes to bloggers to all sorts of folks came up and helped me teach this class and turned it into an incredible class. I got to take a group of cadets on a deployment. I always wanted to go to India, so I took 8 cadets to India. Ended up with an audience with the Dalai Lama. I mean, it's just like ridiculous. The whole thing was just. I was so happy when I was there, and also that opportunity, as you said, to give back. I mean, the cadets were so eager to learn, and so if I was ever struggling in some lecture about the Constitution or our institutional powers or anything, I'd be like, "All right, guys, time out. It's time for war stories," and then like they would all like just gravitate to it. But a bunch of those former cadets became Green Berets. I also, this isn't trying to humble brag, but one of the cadets I mentored and still in very close touch with was Chris Grice, who was one of the first 2 women to become Ranger qualified. And just the opportunity I've been mentored well through my career, and the opportunity to like suddenly get thrust into that role, it was something I absolutely loved. It was great.
Yeah. I mean, and to that end, watching people accomplish something that very few in the military get to accomplish, that's become a Ranger or a Green Beret. And knowing you had a small role in that, I mean, again, I don't think it's humble bragging. I mean, it's the fruits of your labor when they bear out in front of you. It's the same thing as one of your own children. You're more proud than you are bragging about it. But even for Kristen Geis or any of your other folks who are Green Berets, what's that feeling like watching them get to that level?
I mean, it's awesome. I mean, when I'm based in North Carolina, so I've been down to some Green Beret graduations, and I remember these like skinny little twerps, cadets who are now like Green Berets. And I mean, they will, some of them have, said the reason they did this is because they saw me. And of course, that's an obligation, is I really hope they have a, good experience from it. But, Chris in particular, I went to her, change of command, where she became the first female infantry company commander. And, she's such a humble professional, and with such a spotlight on her, throughout her military career. And I think she's using that spotlight for a lot of good. I have a lot to learn from Chris on that. She's just very, very impressive. But yeah, it is. and like I would say to the cadets, and I say it to my students is, look, I'm on your team. So if I can help you in a transition, as you said in the intro, I've made a lot of different, transitions to different careers, different steps. People want to start a company, get in tech, do politics, whatever. It's one of the pure joys of being a teacher is it's not just that, semester long class thing if you want it to be. So yeah, I love it.
And I think it was her who wrote the article about changing the ACFT standards for women.
She did.
Just fantastic work. You guys can Google it. And for the non-military folks listening and watching, if you're not understanding the ACFT and the change from the APFT, it may be a little bit Greek to you when you're reading it. But obviously, for all those in the military who and veterans know what this is all, just absolutely amazing work and an incredible point of view. In fact, the article is saved; it's bookmarked on my phone because I just think it's a very lucid viewpoint, and no doubt she learned some of that from you. So after West Point, you head on to IAVA, downloading more information, just continuing to mold young minds everywhere.
No, I mean, actually, straight from West Point, I immediately moved home to the Ozarks.
Oh, that's right. You ran for office.
Yeah, I ran for office.
Yeah, I forget about this because I remember, and this is funny. I remember you called me up and asked me to do a video for you, and I gladly did it. Now, full disclosure again for everybody, we're on sort of opposite ends of the political spectrum. But I'll say this, and I think it's super important because especially now, given where we are, because there is a vacuum of leadership in our country right now, and that's the one thing I remember saying on the video. It didn't matter that we came from different backgrounds. It didn't matter that we may have different views. I would have given you my vote simply because I would have followed you anywhere because you are a leader. And at the end of the day, there's always a discussion to be had with leaders among their constituents. And that's the main reason why I would have cast my vote in your name. Granted, Missouri couldn't have done it anyway, but
right.
I wanted your audience to know that your leadership qualities were the best thing about you. And so you run for office, and did you walk across the entire state with a flag, if I remember that correctly?
Well, running for office is, that was an awesome experience. I mean, it's a true startup. You start with like kind of one person and an idea, and then, you end up, raising money, building a huge staff and team. And then in my case, when you get smoked in the actual results, the whole thing vaporizes in a matter of a couple of days on it. But there were two things that drove me to it. Is I remember sitting at West Point thinking, I taught American politics, so I understood things like the midterm effect and the RD preference of a specific district. And I was looking at this race, which was in southern Missouri, an incumbent there, and saying, this looks really hard and this looks almost impossible. And then there was this epiphany of like, quit waiting for this to be easy. Like if this were easy, anybody would do it and there'd be a line of 50 people out the door, doing it. But just get in there, surround yourself by the best people possible, work really hard, and, you miss every shot you don't take. But to your point on the walking across, the second epiphany was, there's a playbook to how you run for Congress, and money is a core component of it. I don't begrudge that. It's just a factor of politics, and we were successful at it. But this was a real rough cycle. And so early on, we realized, hey, why am I running like a 60-year-old state senator with like a standard playbook? Why don't I instead run as like a boot wearing, tobacco chewing, truck driving, Green Beret, fresh out of the military? And so we did a lot of things that maybe look like stunts, but in fact were great. And one of which was I would work kind of dirty jobs in all of the 28 counties. And this is one of the poorest districts in America. But that's how I became actually knowledgeable about this whole thing of politics, which is, when you change tires with somebody, not for a photo op for like 10 minutes, but like the whole day, that's when they open up about their stories, their challenges, the challenges of healthcare, their questions about Afghanistan, all those things like come out after that time. And then, yes, there's something called the 100-mile yard sale in southern Missouri. And so we marched the entire 100 miles over a period of 4 days. meeting voters, talking with folks. So running for office, while it was a huge inflection point for me. I mean, I met my wife most notably through that, but there's a lot of division in today's politics, and to have the opportunity to like channel people's hopes and dreams and aspirations for something better was a real honor. And you can draw not a dotted line, but a dashed line or a solid line from running that race, running well, and then being offered, the C-level job at the VA shortly thereafter, and have that opportunity to start implementing the things that I wanted to see government do better.
Yeah, and of all the things that you just mentioned and the things that you take from running for office, was there any part about it that you made you regret doing it at all?
Well,
other than losing, I guess.
Yeah.
Not winning.
It's a good question. I mean, you're not paid, right. So I went into debt immediately out of getting out of the military. And it's crazy because you're, raising millions of dollars and paying all the rest of your staff, but not paying yourself. So there was a financial hit. And, back to that epiphany of when you get in immediately, you feel like you're getting pulled a lot of different ways that aren't you. And the best advice I got is just run you, be yourself. So Mark, when you run, I expect all sorts of a Mark version of the campaign, because, otherwise you're trying to be somebody that you're not. And my biggest fear was not running and losing, which ultimately happened. I thought I was going to win. We all thought, I was going to win, and then that did not happen. But my biggest fear was running and losing myself in that process. And so back to this idea of surrounding yourself with great people. I had a phenomenal team. One of my closest friends was my campaign manager, a political neophyte just like me, but Navy vet, Harvard Business School, and I lured him out of McKinsey to come, run my campaign. And he was my asthma check. He and 2 or 3 other core staff members. When it's Tommy, this doesn't sound like you. This is not you. You need to be you on this. And if voters don't like it, which they didn't, they can not vote for you. But I see a lot of people that are interested in politics. They get into politics, and it can be a bad outcome. I mean, it's combat. It's people are coming at you from the very beginning. But people that don't know who they are and get swayed into positions or saying stuff that they don't believe. And people that just don't plan and prep for this. It's just like going on a deployment. There are SOPs and rules and things that you either know or you figure out on your way. And one thing I always try to do before my deployments is learn the language, understand the geography, do all that, understand your operational environment. So there's certainly people that I think run and aren't executing on a plan, or they hear somebody promise, hey, if you get in this race, we're going to give you $1 million, or we're going to support you all the way. We took the approach of there's no helicopter coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And if somebody helps us along the way, that's fantastic. But it allowed us not, to come to the end of it, know that we left everything on the table, and leave our supporters and the people that we got to know with a strong impression of, hey, this was an exceptionally well-run campaign. It was just terrible timing in a terrible district.
Right. Is there a sense, what's the sense of loss after something that big? Is it like a death, a divorce? I mean, how down were you after the loss?
Well, it's rapid, for one. So and we wanted to we did pay our campaign staff through the end of the year, but usually these things just dissolve in the matter of 24 or 48 hours. So you go into, all this attention, all this focus. And so certainly the amount of energy changed. I went to southern Mexico for about a month and didn't wear a shirt, drank a lot of pina coladas and Coronas, fished, And I just didn't want to ask anybody for anything when I came out of that. Like, you're constantly asking people for support, for money, for help, for all that. But then I came out of that with like a real clear perspective, which is running a campaign well, you end up meeting like 20 lifetimes of people. And, people that have helped me in every step along the way since then. And namely my wife, is who I met during the campaign. So like without that experience and without frankly taking that big ass risk, like, it kind of accelerated an intense period of my life. And that's clearly an inflection point. So if any of your listeners are thinking about it, there's a number of programs out there that help veterans, think about this transition. And they should get in the arena. Look, the quote on my wall is the Teddy Roosevelt quote of man in the arena. And getting that blood and knowing victory or defeat is something I've tried to live by. And you don't get it by sitting on the sidelines waiting for it to be easy.
Amen. 100%. And everybody should live by that quote. In fact, a lot of football coaches I know have used that quote in covering sports and everything else. They use it in reference to the media often.
Yeah. When are you going to run, Mark? Come on. I mean,
look, honestly, I've had discussions about it. I've had legitimate discussions about it with people. It is a goal of mine. It's on the radar screen. As you mentioned, a lot of it is about timing. A lot of it is about, where you are in your family life. It's a lot easier to do when you're a single man. And you don't have responsibilities to anybody else other than yourself. And yes, you can incur a lot of debt, but when you have a lot of childrens at home, it changes the game, and you need the support of a spouse and a wife and kids and everything else, because you're essentially gone for at least a year straight. I mean, it's another version of a deployment, and you have to understand that going in. Everybody's got to be bought in on it. But yes, I mean, it is absolutely a goal of mine. It's something I want to do. I think me. I am best served in leadership positions when I can serve others. It's where I feel most comfortable. I've never been a staff guy. I've always been more of a command guy. I like to be where the rubber meets the road. So I'll keep you posted on it. I'm sure we'll have a long conversation about the do's and don'ts of how to enter into this thing. But I would like to think I do it on the earlier side of 50 than on the later side of 50. But I would say this too, and here's the one thing I would, if I were to run, and the old adage in elections is it's not hard to win the first one, it's hard to win the second one, right? Anybody can win one election. It's winning the second one that's really, really tough. Well, I know. Look at the audience I'm talking to. I apologize. But no, I'll never understand career politicians in the same spot over and over again. Like, I think me, like I have to be on a constant ascent, because either you're growing or you're dying. There's not a third direction. And whatever the job is, I would commit to doing it for 1, maybe 2 terms, and then I'd get out and I'd go do something else, because I believe everything has to move forward. And the only way thing moves forward is when new people and fresh blood get into positions. The really successful military units don't stay successful and don't get the notoriety over years because one person was the same person for 10 years. They get a whole variety of different commanders and leaders who cycle their way through and buy into a certain mentality and all that. So I think I would do it and maybe stay 1 or 2 terms. I mean, of course, totally speaking with delusions of grandeur, but, and then get out and do something else, much like you did. Even though you didn't win, I would want it to springboard me into something where I can make a positive effect somewhere else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And for what it's worth, I'd encourage you to look at the executive branch. So many folks, including myself, start off and say, I'm going to run for office and I'm going to run for the legislature. You got to really understand what the legislature does. I mean, it creates policy. So like, if you love like student government and Robert's Rules of Order and, this kind of constant, when I got to DC, I was definitely a neophyte, and somebody explained it to me like this. Congress is a fixed mindset. There are 435 seats. You only gain by taking. You're not going to create like 5 new seats or anything like that. So it's a fixed mindset, and it's very much in that D versus R, battle over and over again. Then they've delegated so much power and authority to the executive branch where you have, bureaucrats, yes, but then our model also has this pretty heavy layer of political appointees that come in. And there, the power is awesome. It's awesome. And there's an imperative to execute. You actually have clients that are waiting for you, veterans in my case, to say, hey, I'd like it to be easier to get these benefits or understand what these laws that have been passed that like actually affect my daily life. And so my experience at the VA was awesome in that fact. It taught me like I chose the wrong office, to run for. I really should have been thinking on the executive branch, because just the word executive is action oriented. And so for what it's worth, Mark, I take a look at the executive branch before you take a look at Congress.
As I said, I've never been much of a staff guy. I'm much more of a command role type deal.
Yeah.
It's better where I am. All right, back to you. Now that we've digressed again, just real quick, your time at IAVA. Obviously, again, this comes right after the election, but one of the more noted veterans organizations out there. And what's your role as the advisor?
Yeah, so Paul Rykoff had actually had come and spoken to my class at West Point. We got to know each other. For those of you that know Paul, he is an absolute force of nature and a close friend of mine. So after I'd shown my proclivity to be able to raise funds in a very difficult environment, Paul asked me to come in and look at their fundraising and their approach to that. And he's since moved on and transitioned after at least a decade as IAVA's director on that. But that was great to kind of this realization of, okay, I could have gotten elected and helped veterans that way. Let me see what one of the premier nonprofits out there and that approach, how they approach influencing veterans' lives for the better. So that was fairly short while I was also trying to wrap up my graduate studies. But I will always be grateful for Paul, because when you lose an election, there's this common sense of like all the opportunities are right there, but it's still entrepreneurial. You got to kind of make your own way right at. It's not like a bunch of people are saying, hey, I want you to run my private jet company or something like that right out of an election.
Right. And by the way, Paul, a former guest on their Hazard Ground. You can just Google it and find out. You'll hear his story. But as a matter of fact, I just spoke to him yesterday. He was on my radio show this morning. So,
great.
Yeah. Great. So little symmetry there. Okay. On to the VA, which now, if I remember correctly, I'm trying to do the math on Shinseki was the director at the time, correct? When you got hired there?
That's right. So I started, I had this brief stint in management consulting for about 9 months while I was going through the confirmation. It was confirmed in August of 2012. And
by the way, how nerve-wracking is that, waiting for confirmation?
Well, it's just I've got an N of one of the process, on this, but I think at the time I was the youngest Senate-confirmed assistant secretary or something like that. Luckily, I had some good friends that I made through the campaign. So people on the Hill that could, help champion and pull that through. The thing that is not obvious about it is getting the White House to decide on you, for this position. So, that's how it flows, is the president, has all these different appointments. And that's its own really strange influence operation, is like who ultimately makes this decision that they're making lots of decisions out of the White House. So, how does this bubble up? How does this, become somewhat urgent? And, a lot of these folks are DC operators. They are in a law firm in DC. They're fine. Just simply being considered helps their brand. Of course, a lot of them, want to serve and have strive for that one position. And here I was a total like young outsider. And you got to imagine there were like 12 people who had always wanted to be this assistant secretary and were probably, much more qualified than me. But, to President Obama's and Secretary Shinseki's credit, I think they said, let's take a risk on this guy who's young, but clearly knows the veteran experience. At that point, it was Dr. Sowers because of the post 9/11 GI Bill. My home loan was through the VA. My healthcare was through the VA. And I think they liked the idea of having, somebody that actually understood vets because they were a vet, understood the benefits because they used the benefits, to come into that role. So once that happened and it went over to the Senate, it actually moved very, very quickly through the Senate. And, prepping for Senate confirmation, I mean, I think I had a book about that big, just, reference and study material on it, but it was very polite, went very well. And, then boom, you're confirmed. And I was at McKinsey on a project in Mexico, and they're like, we need you in a week. And so we moved from San Francisco to DC in about a week.
Wow. And so the job, I mean, it's a lengthy title, Assistant Secretary of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs. What's the basic job description?
So the core of it is, you are the, public affairs side of it. So you feel free to Google my, TV appearances when I was trying to explain, our terrible disability claims backlog. And that was just, so one was just simply explaining the VA is the easiest way to say it.
It's the easiest way to say it, but the hardest thing to do.
Oh, it's so hard. And I mean, so it is everything from like, our website would like feature what's Secretary Shinseki like talking to a group of vets. And I'm like, nobody's coming to the website to see that stuff. They're coming because they served and would like to know and understand their benefits. So let's change the entire website to orient to the customer and away from like the standard kind of DC, website on it. The intergovernmental affairs was interesting because it was the relationships between the VA and all the states and the tribes and the municipalities. But the thing I was most passionate about is, I was coming straight from a consultant background, business background. And my central question was, hey, it's clear when people get into the VA and use the VA, like their lives are better on any metric, greater chance of being homeowners, greater chance of having a college degree, less chance for suicide, less chance for mental health problems, all that stuff, if they can get in. And so I asked the question, we had about 8 million veterans that are utilizing one of our services. And in one of my first meetings, I remember I asked, so is 8 million a good number? Are we killing it right now? Or, are we way underperforming? And should all the veterans be utilizing, of the 22 million be utilizing our benefits? So I asked, well, do they know about their benefits? And we surveyed vets, and it turned out about 40% utilized one of the benefits. And then when we asked vets, what do you know about your benefits? About 40% said they know something about their benefits, and 60% knew nothing about their benefits. And so that interesting problem of how do you communicate effectively to veterans about the benefits that they've earned through their service. And this is tough communication because it's multi-generational. It's people that served in peacetime a lot of them don't consider themselves veterans, or they think veterans is just combat veterans. Having a strategy on that, and so that's where I focused the bulk of my effort. It was ultimately my biggest failure in government. I'll send you the ad campaign that we shot through the Ad Council that was powerful and impactful and encouraged people to know and understand their benefits. But when that, after spending taxpayer dollars on it, getting it all ready, having it set in the queue, and then I failed to be able to get it green lit, I'm like, I can't have a job where I'm being told not to tell veterans about their benefits. So anyway, that was the VA secretary in a nutshell. Sorry for the little diatribe there, but
no. And I mean, I hate to ask a sore question because it was ultimately Shinseki. The only real scandal of the Obama presidency was the VA scandal with Shinseki at the top of it, and things that went wrong there. I mean, care to shed any light on that? I mean, do you have any, not inside info is not the right term, but I mean, were you sort of watching all those dominoes fall?
Well, so I left in April of 2014, and then the scandal broke, I think, about 3 weeks later, and then Secretary Shinseki was, removed from office like a month later. And look, Secretary Shinseki is an amazing American. He has an incredible story, incredible veteran. But and the challenge of running the VA, like, let's not underestimate this. Like, veterans are a very prickly group, and providing healthcare to veterans, healthcare to anybody is tough. Right now, Duke Hospital, somebody is dying in there because of negligence on the part of an administrator or a doctor or any of that. It happens a lot in hospitals. When it happens in a VA hospital, that is the government killing a veteran. So his task and his responsibility, and he inherited a ton of challenges on the disability, claims backlog that has since been solved. But I think if he were on, one of the challenges of it is he grew up in a military that the press was kind of the enemy.
Right.
And this is, really before social media and all that. Like, you got to be out there engaging and communicating over and over and over again. And I think there was some hesitancy and, even in the Phoenix scandal, getting out in front of it and saying, here's what we know, we're trying our best, we'll be back to you tomorrow, and then do that. I think people can understand that and get that. But when it's radio silence from government and this is discovery through the press, it just didn't end well. So it's a challenging job. It is a super challenging job to run the VA. I mean, largest integrated healthcare system in America, one of the largest home loan programs in America, largest education benefit in America. And when it doesn't work like clockwork, you're going to hear about it. Hear about it.
Big fan of the home loan stuff. Still working through my benefits portion. I'm actually in the process of going back now and applying for more of the multiple surgeries and a whole bunch of other things that have just sort of caught up with me over the last, decade now. So after my first go round and I got my disability and everything else, I'm going back for more. I know the process though, so my level of patience has probably grown a little bit more than what it was the first time around. Is I got a monthly letter reminding you, hey, we got your case. We're just still thinking about it. 19 months later, finally, something came in the mail, a big packet. It's like waiting for your college admissions packet to finally show up, except it took, a year and a half. So anyway, we digress. Now you're going back to Duke, and I know you love Duke because the one thing you sent me was a Duke t-shirt, and I still have it. I don't know why I've never thrown it out. I'm not a Duke fan.
Yeah.
But because of it came from you, I know you love Duke.
Now, why aren't you a Duke fan? I'm always curious about it.
I don't know, because I'm from New York, North Carolina and New York, may as well be a different country if you ask me. I hear the Outer Banks is beautiful. I've only driven through North Carolina, never stopped for a visit. Actually, let me rephrase that. I did. I called a basketball game at Duke once, and I think I text you or sent you a screenshot, but I was at Cameron Indoor and I called a basketball game from there when I was doing basketball games for my alma mater, Loyola. They played Duke, and I got to call a basketball game inside Cameron Indoor. So I did stay for that. But it's an amazing university. It's one of the best in the country. Obviously, you got to be really, really sharp to go there as you were. But what's it like going back to teach your alma mater?
Well, so it felt great because, DC was such a high pressure, job and constantly on. I think I went to 43 states, was gone a lot. And then the college professor gig, is a pretty sweet gig, teach a couple of classes, you're done Tuesday at 2, your next class is, Thursday at 1, you're done at 2, and then we'll see you next Tuesday. So, I mean, it was a really, sharp shift between being constantly on. And, that's when my wife was pregnant with our first daughter. We were renovating a home, and it was just kind of a good opportunity to, similar to going to Mexico, of just kind of like an opportunity to decompress. The Duke students are great. Similar, not all, no, I haven't produced many Green Berets out of the Duke students, but the chance to lead and mentor them and be involved on campus was great. I mean, it was a little disconcerting. You come back into a classroom where you took a class however many years ago, and now you're the professor, is a little bit odd. But it's a great. You should spend some more time in North Carolina because it's a great state, and that area in particular, the Research Triangle, is just vibrant, growing. Fantastic place to be. So But,
I hear Asheville is fantastic again, the Outer Banks. And guess what? North Carolina has something I love that Georgia doesn't: legalized sports betting. So,
I
and
didn't even
legalized
know that.
They got plenty of casinos in North Carolina. They got Harris Cherokee there. Plenty of casinos in North Carolina. Good for you guys. It's like millions in revenue every year just because people like me exist who like to place the occasional wager from time to time.
I didn't know that. I don't bet on sports, but I guess
There's casino gambling too. You want to sit down at the blackjack table? We can do that.
Yeah. Well,
it's not you, Tommy. Trust me, I know.
No. I've actually over one of the COVID things or pre-COVID, I ended up in this poker group with a bunch of Duke quants, former World Series of poker stuff, and so I love that now. I mean, that's a hell of a game.
Well, then let's do that. I'll see you in the mountains of North Carolina for a little bit of poker action. Let's definitively do that.
Let's make it happen.
So after there, you found your own real estate company. And I remember when you started pumping this, and I'm like, what is this all about? Because I think I was an adult enough at that point in time to buy a house. I feel like I was. I haven't really grown up until recently, as you know. But I was a late bloomer, Tommy. So it's called Golden Key, and it's a real estate tech company. So explain that whole thing.
Yeah, so I come from a family of entrepreneurs and always wanted to start my own company. I always had these, I was one of those guys in the Army who was always like, I'll have this little side hustle on the side and explore this stuff. And got some business experience, at least at the corporate level. But, really great companies start with a core problem that you understand and you feel. And for me, when we were moving from Washington, D.C. to Duke, I had, like most of us, we had looked online and found the homes that we wanted to see. And then, I was sitting outside of this home and I'm like, I don't want to call a real estate agent just to let me in. I've already done the work. I just need to see the home. And it was a vacant home. So I ended up breaking into the home and so that we could see it, it was up for auction. So get a bid on it. And then one of my cousins is a very successful real estate agent. And we started talking about it more about how the model doesn't work great for customers because you end up hiring a real estate agent, paying them a load of commission, and you pay on both sides, whether you're buying or selling. You're either paying 6% more for the house or writing 6% typically to real estate agents. And it's like, well, that's the only model that's really out there. What about, does this work for real estate agents? And it turns out it works incredibly well for some top real estate agents. I mean, they hoover it up. They're, the established ones. But there's 1.8 million people with real estate licenses that can do the job, can show you the home, can write the offer, can do all those things. They're just not the fully established, advertised real estate agents. So they're not as great at business development. So what our platform allowed you to do is kind of Uber-like, allow you to order the real estate services that you need. Like, I want to see 328 Main tomorrow at noon. That goes out to a bunch of real estate agents. If they want it, they grab it, and then they let you in and show you the home. And you just, as the customer, just pay for the services, and then we pay the agents themselves. And then when you buy the home or sell the home, you don't pay commission, so you get all that money back to you. And this is the largest investment for most people out there. And if you use agents when you both buy and sell your home, you're typically losing 47% of your gain on a home, and that's just going away for fees. So we ended up, raising venture capital. Lowe's was one of our larger investors on this, and it was just an incredible growth experience for me. I was super slow. It sped me up a ton. Learned a ton more about tech, but a ton more about raising and venture capital. And it was a great experience. And so that was acquired a little more than 3 years ago. And so, wasn't always passionate about real estate. And that was part of the acquisition, is like, hey, I don't want to do this for the next, 10 years or so. But, again, great team, great experience, great opportunity to, learn and grow through that.
And now finally, the current role, you're flying private jets. You're the president of Fly Exclusive. This isn't your company, is it? You're working for another individual?
No, there was an interim step of going back and working DoD, but there's been too many steps. But I started working with this company about a year ago, and It's the fifth or fourth largest private jet operator in the United States, and it's based in Kinston, North Carolina, which is a town of about 20,000, similar in size and kind of composition as my hometown. And a lot of towns in rural America are facing the exact same challenges, which is there's very little growing there, and it's getting older. Manufacturing has gone away. Agriculture is under significant pressure. And what this founder and the CEO have created here is just truly remarkable. It is started with 5 people and 2 jets in about 2015. It's now 75 jets, 500 people, $250 million of revenue, and growing dramatically. So out of Kinston, North Carolina, providing this luxury service. My mom was asking, I was trying to explain to my mom, and she's like, oh, it's like if a Rolls-Royce factory opened up in our, my hometown in the Ozarks. And I'm like, no, it's like if a Rolls-Royce competitor opened up a factory there. So I love the people. The founders got a huge vision of this. And a big part of that vision is, how do we build something that's enduring? How do we build something that the kids and the children of the employees that work here can aspire and work, for this company? And it's private jets, which is pretty cool too. So,
they're a worse ways to fly, from what I understand. I don't know how good it is to fly that way because I've never done it, but there are worse ways.
It is, it's not really in my price bracket, but I do get access every now and then to it, and it's pretty damn addictive. So, I've got 4 little kids. I'm always, I see the pictures of the boys, but you've got 3 more now. Is that right? 5?
2 more. Yeah. 5 total. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is traveling with kids is like, which level of hell am I going to enter on this trip? And I mean, I've had my now 5-year-old at one point in Midway stripped down entirely naked.
Nice.
And I'm just like, what are we doing here, Catherine? So anyway, I haven't taken the family on one of these trips, but I'm excited to do it and have it be easy as opposed to the current challenge.
Now that you've kind of done all this, I mean, again, it's just such an extensive resume. Harken back to your military career, whether it's military in general or being a Green Beret, is there a skill that you have been able to apply to every part of your career, or something that you've always taken with you as a foundation?
Well, I think there's, and this is more about kind of my approach in the military is, you move around a lot, and I've definitely seen people that move around. They come in and they put their hands on their hips and say, okay, I'm in charge now. Here's the way it's going to be. And I learned humility very early on this. I remember the first time I got up in front of my platoon as a engineer. I asked my platoon sergeant, what should I say? And he said, no one ever complained about a short speech from an officer. So, and I had all these grand things that I was going to say about, my vision and all that stuff, but it's less about like your vision and you're like sitting up on the mountaintop and delivering the, tablets to the masses on this. So, I've come into this job exceptionally humble. I tell people, I've got, 12 months of part-time experience in private aviation as I'm talking to somebody who's dedicated their entire life to this industry. So, coming in and listening and learning and, sure, I've got a ton of ideas that I see and I'm like, wow, why can't we do this? But, the first Special Forces imperative is understand your operational environment, is that you don't just show up and say, this is how it's going to be. And certainly there were Special Forces officers that did that. But the successful ones that were my mentors were the ones that like really deeply understood this. So, I mean, I'm on a huge learning curve right now about this industry, the people, the individuals, the challenges, all that. And that's been the same, whether it's politics or coming into government. And anytime I've strayed from that and come in and said, okay, here's my agenda, here's what I'm going to get done, I don't have a lot of time, it's never really worked well.
I should have asked you this before, because you did get out after 11 years, but I mean, how did you know it was time? I mean, look, I say this again as your friend. I mean, clearly from the moment I met you, I knew that there was a different path that you were going to be on than most military folks, just because I knew your skill set and your capabilities were. And I hate to say this because it almost sounds like I'm taking a dump on the military, but you were just well beyond of what the military requires. Your mental capacity is much bigger than what most of the military is worthy of, if that makes any sense. So from that standpoint, how did you know it was time to go and get out? And is there anything you miss about it?
Well, I mean, I'll challenge some of the things you said there. I certainly met a lot of people much smarter than me in the military. Mark, I never was a good fit for the military. And I knew that like from the first day of ROTC. I remember my dad asked me like, my dad asked me how to go. And I'm like, well, I like it, but I don't like all this like taking orders stuff. And my dad was like, I don't know how long this is going to work for you, son. So when I was kind of left alone in the military, when I was at West Point, when I was on Green Beret tours, when I'm in the Russian sector, I thrived in the military. And as soon as I got like the heavy thumb put down on me, it was like, this is not my place. The thing I loved about the military was, in my time in the Army was, at a very young age, you're 22, 23, and you're leading a platoon in Kosovo. You're 26, you're leading a Green Beret team in Iraq. And you're 28, 29, and you're, a professor at an elite institution. And then I just kind of played the tape forward of there was a lot I wanted to do that I didn't want to wait until I was 42 or 44. And I just say, for everyone that wants to stay in the military, that's fantastic. And that's great. And there's no begrudging it. But to your point earlier on politics, it'd be damn impossible for me to run for office right now. Sorry about that. I've got 4 little kids now. I'm very glad I got out and took like big risks immediately. And they didn't all pan out, but they definitely made me better because of it. So what I miss from it, I try to rebuild everywhere I go, which is, a sense of camaraderie, a common mission, your small part in something bigger. So it's not that I don't miss it, but I replicate it wherever I go.
Yeah. And that's what has been great about the Guard for me. I joke around, the Guard, I get to date the Army. I don't have to marry it,
Right.
It allows me the flexibility. And look, I mean, I was never long for the active duty. I knew that. Much like you, I just knew it was sort of a square peg in a round hole mentality. But the Guard has been very good to me. It's given me a sense of direction. It's afforded me opportunities to do things that I would have never done otherwise. And it's allowed me to continue to serve. And I think that has grounded me and kept me humble. And I think it's taught me a lot of valuable lessons in life. So I'm thankful that I'm still able to serve after 22 years and able to do it. But I think in that sense, you and I, we're kindred spirits in why we got along so well and why we're able to understand each other, because our minds worked at just a little bit of a different cycle, if you will, or a different level.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that you stayed in and stayed active on it. And, it was nice to see a lot of my peers, at different levels on that. Just some of the best people that I've ever met who chose to stay in, chose to continue to serve or go into the Reserve or National Guard, because we need it. We need the best and brightest in there. So I'm thrilled that you've stuck in.
Yeah, I got one more ceremony left there, Tommy.
Okay.
One more. I got to get that 06 pinned on, and who knows? It's funny. I don't know how much longer I want to do this, just because I think life is taking over at this point. And I see the operational tempo of which they're using the Guard, and part of it to me is a little bit alarming. The Guard has become a very convenient toy for 50 governors of 50 states. That sometimes I feel like it's misappropriated for what it's designed to do. But again, I do want to get that eagle just for a day, even if it's only for a day, and say that I did it. And because honestly, when you and I were together in Iraq, I would have never dreamed it was possible. I would have never even thought I would have lasted that long. And I say this on the podcast routinely. The Army always has a funny way of putting you where you're supposed to be. I mean, I had hit my 8 years after that deployment. I think a year after that deployment, and I was going to get out. But a couple of dominoes fell, and they offered me a position and said, "Hey, you'll make 04." And next thing you know, I never looked back. And another, 14 years later now, I'm still hanging around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, full bird Colonel Mark is in. I love it. I love it.
It was who would have ever thought? Just
Yeah.
some final notes here for being a Green Beret. While it suited you, and clearly it's not for everybody, but when you talk about the characteristics of what make a good Green Beret, what are they for you?
Well, so I'm certainly not an expert on all of them. I mean, the one thing about Green Berets is you kind of just operate with your team, and you occasionally know the other people in your company, and aside from training, probably nobody else. Um, the thing they test on in the Q course is a powerful skill, and it's a rare skill, which is they're testing you for your ability to handle uncertainty. So, Ranger school, I would know, okay, well, Florida phase, I'm going to be out, for 10 days, or, the mountain phase 1 or phase 2. Like, you could know all that stuff, and you knew how to get your go. And when I went through, they actually gave you feedback immediately of whether you got your go or not. And, in Green Beret training, it's actually not as physically taxing as like Winter Ranger school, but they're testing your mind. They're testing, like, can you operate without any feedback? Your next event is a run. You go off running. Can you pace yourself and meter yourself for the long haul? Because that's the most critical skill. Is you can't have somebody that gets in an uncertain environment, which happens a lot in Green Berets and their mission, and then quits or says, I need more guidance or all that. And that capacity to work in an area of uncertainty is something that is tested for, but it proves itself out, especially given that unique mission. And not to dog any other special operations units that are out there, but this idea of humble professionals really matters. Is each Green Beret is trained in a specific skill set, and they are expected to be professionals and master that domain, and whether that's engineering or medic or communications or whatever. But the only way anything gets done is if they can work well with each other, and critically work well by, with, and through an indigenous force. And you've got to be able to speak their language, know their culture, not come in and just be like, okay, here's big America's here, let me show you everything about how we get this done. So there's this thing between your ears of your ability to handle uncertainty and still operate, and then there's just this kind of approach with your heart of being humble and being able to listen. I'm sure there's wide disagreement with me on that, and others would be like, you got to be this badass and take charge sort of person, but that wasn't my approach, and it wasn't who I admired in the Green Berets.
You've said that humble professional thing several times since you and I were deployed together. And the Green Beret world I was exposed to, and the Green Beret world you grew up into, was still relatively under cloak and secrecy. And now it's as common as anything you can imagine. In our parents' generation, it was John Wayne when you talked about the Green Berets, and that was about it. But now it's every movie that's ever made. We know what they do. We kind of know not necessarily know who they are, but their capabilities and skill sets and everything else. Is that a bad thing?
Well, I'd challenge that a little bit. I think you're confusing Navy SEALs with Green Berets. I mean, there's always this story about I got a dog on a SEAL. There's this thing of like, what happens when different parts of the military encounter a snake, and artillery, fire for effect and all that. And Navy SEALs, expend their primary and secondary weapon systems, withdraw to the boat, and write the screenplay about their encounter with the snake. So, I think I've actually admired how the Green Beret as a community have not written 1,000 books and 1,000 screenplays and said, look at me, look at us, look at, certainly the stories are there, but it's definitely part of our ethos on this. But there's and it's one of the differences, internally. There's all these kind of measuring contests between these different special operations units. We have a very different mission than the SEALs or the Rangers or any
there's measuring contests between 5th group and 10th group and 3rd group and 7th.
Oh yeah,
Are you kidding?
yeah, totally. Yeah.
So, but again, it's just, I'm always curious on the perspective. And I think you know this. I mean, I was super thankful for my experience. It made me into the leader I am today. I would have never had a military career after it if I had probably done something else. I probably, like you, would have went on to do something different. But it's an experience that has stuck with me, and even to this day, 22 years, it's been the sole best part of my entire military career. It is at the top of it. Those 15 months between three different SF battalions that I was there, between 5th and 10th group, was some of the most pivotal days of my entire life. And inshallah, as they say, I made it out for the most part in one piece, and I take that experience with me. And with that, I mean, typically we spend a lot of time talking about combat, but itself. But when it comes to your story, Tommy, there's so many layers to it. There's so much more there, and it would have done a disservice to our audience and to you to focus solely on that. I mean, sure. And again, I know you would have taken it from a strategic and tactical standpoint. There would have never been any real gory details or anything like that. So I would have been fishing for something I would have never caught on the end of the line. That's how well I know you. But and I will say again, to you personally, I mean, even to this day, I love you like a brother. I'd lay down in traffic for you without even a hesitation. I'm glad after all these years, we still have a friendship and still maintain a relationship, even if it's just in passing through social media. But I hearken back to those nights and those discussions that you and I had that helped me into the soldier and leader that I am today, and certainly the man that I am today, because we spent a lot more discussions too. They weren't just military related. You and I were just two guys kicking back and getting to know each other a little better.
Well, Mark, thanks for having me on the show, and congrats on the expanded family and all the success in broadcasting. I mean, one thing I've loved about watching you go after it is, I think you mentioned this back in Iraq, of like, this is what you wanted to do, and and it's not a straight line progress, is it? I mean, like, it's like fits and starts and peaks and valleys and all that, and I love watching your career on this, and hopefully next time this won't be over Zoom, but in person over a beer.
Absolutely. Well, again, best of luck, continued success, best to you and the family. And I couldn't be happier to say these to you. Tommy Sowers, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Take care.
You've been listening to Kill Cliff's Hazard Ground podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.